Welcome to Nerdcraft. I'm David, and I'll be your host for today. So, we're going to be talking about anime today. Its origins, where it came from, how it started, things like that. When it became over into the US. We won't be focusing on Japan that much. This is more of an educational video to kind of let people know what anime was before it came here. And it all began with Speed Racer when it came over to the United States. So to start with, the original name for Speed Racer is Mach Go-Go. It's about Joe Mifune, or Speed Racer, as he was known in the American adaptation. It got its start in the 1930s as a manga and came over here later on as the anime we all know in the 1960s. In fact, it first premiered over here in 1967, for those wondering. The story's pretty generic, and it shows proof of an idea, bringing something over, and it was successful for what it did at its time. And the 60s was a rough era for anime. It wasn't easy to come over here in a largely dominated field. There were movies, there were other things that were available, that were made, but I think Speed Racer or Astro Boy were the two biggest of their era. But the 60s, while they were slow, they did lead into an even slower era, the 70s. And with them, the 70s brought Captain Harlock. So Captain Harlock came out, and it was about a pirate who was fighting against despair as humanity had been subjugated by an alien invader, and his crew went on daring missions to take over and take back what was taken. Now, this aired in 1978, so the quality's not that good, but if you can find it, it's worth a watch, and it's good anime history for those of us who are interested in that sort of thing. So moving on from the 70s, we hit the 80s, and this is where a genre that is much beloved began, for me anyways. It became very well known as Voltron, the Defender of the Universe. This came out in 1984, a little bit before my birth, but I did see it as a child growing up, and it informed my young mind of mech genre. Now, this is more of a cartoon mech genre, not to be confused with later genres that would be evolved much later down the line. Now, this genre is heavily influenced by a lot of elements that I could go on and on about for hours. It's something that I think fans of the series and genre know well, from many other ones that will be discussed later to the ones that we discuss right now. But for the time, it was impressive. It was a great show that had a great plot about 5 lion robots fighting against the evil King Zarkin while protecting Allura. Voltron was the defender of humanity. It was a hero, when I think, in some cases, a hero was needed. That wasn't a guy with an S on his chest. Ultimately, after Voltron, anime would explode, and in bringing 2 massive titans of the genre in the 90s. These are things I grew up with, so I will probably sit on this topic for a long time. I've kind of breezed through the other ones, because in large part, they're before my time. I don't have a lot of information to give on them. I did my research on Speed Racer, did a little bit on Harlock, and a little bit on Voltron. Not very much. Because these weren't things I grew up with. I don't feel I have a right to represent them properly as someone that did. I can't properly give you a representation of something I didn't see and wasn't there for at the time, when the black and white age of anime was still going on, largely. Color didn't even come into being largely until the 70s, you have to realize. So, me being a 90s baby, I grew up with things that you're about to see. And one of them was a defender who would protect everyone. Some of us just remember her as Rini. Others remember us as Sailor Moon.
Fighting evil by moonlight, winning love by daylight, never running from a real fight. She is the one named Sailor Moon.
Forgiving my tongue slip earlier, this was when it started for me. Uesugi, or Sabrina in English, was also known as Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon in Japan. She came over here and dominated a large portion of my life. Me and my friends would sit gathered around the TV watching her and her companions fight for justice. It was something we could latch on to. It was something that we could do, you know? We could pretend to be a part of this. I remember being Tuxedo Mask as a child and trying my best to be that person, upholding honor, tradition, and all these things that she believed in, a champion of truth and justice. She was something that I think a lot of people could aspire to. And I think that's what helped a lot of us develop the way we were, is because from that time period we saw her as a freedom fighter of sorts, someone who went against the norms of society around us and upheld what she believed in. She was not like the best student or an overachieving person, so it was easier to connect with her than most. And I feel like that Sabrina, or Uesugi, whatever you would like to call her, did a large thing for anime overall. Her contribution is no small thing. There are other animes in this genre that came out in the 90s, but I feel like Sailor Moon did more than just show fighting, and more than just anything else. It showed openings. There's been an evolution of openings that has happened over anime. If you look through them, you kind of see a peak hit in the 90s. Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, these animes began a whole new thing, where openings became an art form. It became almost an art into itself. Stories became complex and riveting. Things that were taking chances, developing new ideas. It was a stirring pot, or a melting pot, of ideas and beliefs. Things were being poured in, and it changed things. It changed people. It helped a lot of us have someone we could count on. And for me, I'm happy to say I counted on Sailor Moon as a child. She made my life a lot easier than it was. So, let's move on to our next guest of honor in the 90s, because this isn't a short one, and we all know what's next. That's right, the anime that could. It kept going long before many people thought it would. It still goes on today. We still see it. So this anime took its boom in the 90s with several franchises starting up. You had Dragon Ball, which was the prequel about Goku's upbringing. You had Dragon Ball Z, the story of Goku and his companions fighting against numerous threats. But what it came down to here was, this was less story-driven than Sailor Moon, I would say. It was more about fighting, about many scenes of screaming into the air. 3 to 4 episodes sometimes of a character screaming and yelling into the sky. And this is no exaggeration. There were long times there. Blood and gore were in this too. I remember vividly watching as Raditz punched a hole in Piccolo or Goku and it being red. I remember Piccolo having green blood or purple blood at one point. So this anime took strides to make combat anime. Sort of a brutal, violent showing that the boys went towards. Sailor Moon was meant more for the girls, whereas the boys gravitated towards Dragon Ball Z. I kind of fell in between because I could appreciate a good story more than combat as a little boy. And so, yeah, you know. But moving back into topic, this anime came out in the 90s and just dominated everything. It was the starting point for something big. Bigger than most people realize. If you want to look at where anime got its kickstart after the 80s, I would argue it comes down to this. Fist of the North Star did come out in the 80s as well, and I did not talk about that one for a reason. That one is pretty well known, but I feel like Voltron might be better known to a degree, because kids grew up with it. Dragon Ball Z, though, is undisputed. It came on Cartoon Network over to these shores and dominated the TVs. Children would watch this in droves by the hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions. It had a cultural shock that hit us to our core. And, much like a Kamehameha, it hit through pretty much everything. And it didn't stop. It has continued to bloom and blossom even past the 90s. And this is one of the few times where I will say a warning in effect for the next portion. So what's coming next is I'm going to have to put an alert up. If you want more of this, it's going to have to be done in a separate video. This genre is massive. I'm not even able to talk about it completely in a single YouTube video. Not without going over an hour mark. That's how big this thing is. They literally have a statue of this in Japan that is the equivalent of our Statue of Liberty in the North Americas. So, let's break this down and just say the next one, well, Amuro Ray's not launching, but Hiro Yui is. Talking about Gundam Wing. This is something fresh in my mind even to this day. It created the real mech genre. These were not lions fusing together. These were dark, introspective stories about war. Things that you can't imagine happening. They took a look at story and dove in head first, making dark, complicated stories popular. Gundam Wing is largely the one that made it popular in North America. They made mech genre anime come over here and explode. The real mech genre began on Gundam Wing's back. Is Gundam Wing the first? No. But it is the one in North America that has the most storied history. It follows many characters. You have Hiro Yui, the pilot of Gundam Zero. You have Troa Max... Oops, I just mixed two people up. Troa Barton. He piloted the gun with the Gatling gun arm. You have Death Scythe, which was piloted by Duo Maxwell. There are many pilots in this, and all of them are interesting and fascinating. There's going to be one or two you latch onto. This was also the beginning of something Gundam has done frequently. They have made a character out of one of their most popular characters, known as Char Aznable, of the original Gundam fame. He is referenced very frequently in anything connected, and even not, you'll see design inspiration choices that are based on his initial design. He was the prototype for the villain, but in this one, we had Miliardo Peacecraft, or Quetz, I believe his name was. It's been a long time, but I remember his original name. So, he is what began villains in anime. This is when villains became more interesting and three-dimensional. They weren't just Frieza trying to blow up a planet, or Sailor Moon battling the dark forces of the Queen. These were not creatures looking for just darkness. These were human beings who were put against each other in war. It is not a simple thing. This is something you will have to explore for yourself, and I fully recommend that you do. Now, I could keep going and explain how anime has evolved over this time and turned into something really fascinating. Anime is arguably in a place where a lot of TV shows wish they were. I can name many great animes with fantastic stories and great voice acting, but TV shows I'm a little more pressed on. Because nowadays things have changed. Things have gotten smoother and cleaner. And with streaming service, anime production is very hard now. It isn't like it used to be. People don't gather up around the TV to watch an anime. This isn't the universe Gundam Wing flew into. This is the time period when things have changed. For the better, for the worse, it's all up to your interpretation. But there are many animated commentators and people who can help you realize and see broader horizons than what you're seeing. Anime America, Bennett the Sage, Flex person's name that I forget here. There are many fans of anime on YouTube, and I'm just trying to shed a little light on the history of this genre we love. And if you guys like this, comment below, subscribe, let me know if you want to learn anything else. I'm pretty well educated on D&D, VTM. Let's see, I also know comic books and video games very largely, obviously. Anime is something I've been passionate about since I was a kid. And this is one of my chances to share that passion with you guys. To let you see what I've seen. And enjoy what I've seen. It's a beautiful thing, anime. It's a representation of art at its finest. And I hope we get to continue seeing it. But I'm going to head out. It was nice to talk to you guys and share some of my knowledge. Anyways, later.